All right. Hoods up, motherfuckers. Keep your hands above board and welcome to the round table. I am Anthony Tyler. This is Black Hoodie Alchemy, and I have my two cohorts here with me. Yeah, see, we're doing right now. It's a small. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not a restart, but getting a fresh start a little bit. In the feed lately, we've had some of the Patreon episodes that we've just put into the main feed now. I've talked about that as is. And I've got some, the between last year and the beginning of this year, life has been pretty crazy for me. So I've just felt fortunate to be doing this, the podcast and everything else, just amidst all sorts of uncertainty, nothing to worry about. And I do have some good news. As much as I am an artist, I do have to pay the bills, and I am going to be starting an electrician apprenticeship here in August. We're recording in May, so just a little bit of a heads up. That's going to be a bit of a commitment, but I've been an artist my whole life, so this will not be stopping. I've mentioned before maybe that we might get to like 2 episodes a month at times, so you keep that in mind. But the show is going to keep rolling, that's for sure. And given how I have a dip, it's not going to start in August. I have a few months. I have decided, I'm not putting pressure on myself here, but I am definitely going to at least start and hopefully at least finish the rough draft of the third book. I'm not going to talk about that too much yet, but I wanted to put that out there a little bit, get some momentum behind it. What else? Been shouting out the dudes from Zig Mentality lately. I heard from Jig, who is the vocalist. He plays an instrument. I can't remember which one it is. It's bass or guitar. But Jig's a dope dude, and he's been the brother that I've been talking with, and he actually sent me some of the unreleased masters of their new album that's coming out at the end of May. That was some good shit. What I will say, without spoiling anything, is that I've played between the 2 episodes where we played their music. There's been they just have a nice peppering of like some chunky, like hardcore riffs and some good old rock and roll, and it's like some grunge and experimental action, and it's got a little bit of all that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And Dive Manual audiobook, go check that out. All the book action and whatever else in the show description there. Joe's actually beginning the process of recording the Hunt Manual audiobook, so that's exciting. And yeah, I guess I do have a lot of announcements. I've been thankful to have shit going on, at least. I do have the article that I talked about in the Sasquatch episode that was going to be released in Paranormality magazine. It is in that issue. I can't remember what issue number it is off the top of my head. I think it was 37. It's got Dyatlov Pass on the cover, and I've got like 3 or 4 pages in there. So looking forward to getting a physical copy of that. Check that out if you're interested, digital or physical. And I think that's it. So, and commercials. I've recycled some old commercials lately. We've got a fresh batch in, so keep your ears open for that commercial break. I know Chris got to sample them before we started recording here, and he definitely approves. There's some good family fun in there. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. All right, so what are we talking about today? Well, first, just real quick, how you guys doing? How you doing, Seed Person?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm about to light this up and get into some interesting conversation, hopefully.
Yeah, guaranteed. And how you been lately, Chris?
Doing great, man. Got a lot going on. Staying busy, trying to stay healthy, fighting off a little cold right now, but we're having a good time in life. Hell yeah.
Yeah, right on. All right, so I'm excited for this episode. Um, it's a pretty esoteric idea, and it plays with ideas that are more mainstream. But I'm interested to see. I know the people, like the heads that tune into the show, are really going to dig this. I'm interested to see, how far it goes. This is one of those episodes where I felt I'm really psyched about it, and sometimes those episodes just it seems like they need more time to breathe. Like, we've talked about this. The three of us have really enjoyed some episodes that people have slept on hard. So I don't know, if people sleep on this one, then um they're really going to be missing out, because I think this is going to be one of my personal favorites. So,
Yeah.
and we're talking about what I call, just for lack of a better term, wanderlust syndrome. And this is a really broad term, an archetypal category, maybe, um, where I think the easiest initial name that everyone will recognize would be Chris McCandless, Into the Wild. He took the name Alexander Supertramp when he was on his travels. And I think, there's a lot of people, McCandless being the biggest name. The more you look into it, and Krakauer even gets into it a little bit in Into the Wild, there's just this whole archetype of person that is drawn to the wilderness, has a wanderlust. It is always tied to the wilderness, but not exclusively. It has a lot to do with the open road, and just that space, that distance, and that pursuit, that open pursuit, and like that, the whole transcendentalist existentialist quality. People like Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman, Tolstoy, and um, I think you could, like, considering this as a really broad spectrum, we could toss people like, Ted Kaczynski in there. He was more of like a isolationist, but that whole idea of psychological distance, you know, um, salute to the Nolans finally doing justice to a Fallout, on the screen outside of a video game. Got me thinking about post-apocalyptia, which I have just always been fascinated with since I was a kid. And playing some of the Fallout games, it's been the first time that I've just been like just right in the mix of like a mainstream cultural zeitgeist. There's like a major wave of people going back and playing Fallout games, and I couldn't help it. I went back and played some, and they're still great. And I love the most just that Mad Max just wandering the post-apocalyptic wasteland. And it feels to me, it kind of slowly dawned on me. Seems like, the archetypal similarities are the same. I mean, these people that are just deserting life and going into the wilderness with this, like, almost like this siren call. It's them. The world isn't post-apocalyptic around them, but they see it similarly. The world is isolated and desolate, and the people that fall into these circumstances or these archetypes are never content with the world around them, and so they're trying to find something more. And that is a beautiful thing on the face of it. But here's the other thing: is it usually leads to disaster, more often than not. And we're not going to talk about him too much, but I wanted to throw him in the mix, and we can give, like, we'll at least bring him up at some point, I'm sure. But John Muir is a dude that I think fits this archetype that is exemplary. Like, he was a pioneer of ecology and philosophy, and like a naturalist that just lived more in the wilderness than he did in modern society. But he was writing books and furthering ecology and all these things. So it can be done in a normal way, but I don't know. It's just the energy of it that drives people bonkers. So I'm gonna talk about the names here, and then we can decide who we want to talk about first. But I want your guys's opinions on this a little bit. We could start with Chris first. Like, what do you think so far? And what if you have any experiences with something that you could call like a wanderlust syndrome? Like, how do you feel about this?
Well, I definitely relate to it in my own life in a lot of different ways. I mean, I've been homeless off and on since I was like 16, but I remember before that, um, always like thinking to myself and like even saying to my parents, like, "Oh, I'm gonna move out of the house real early," and I always very fascinated by like the idea of train hopping, although I've never like lived the crust punk life. I've kind of stayed in this one area. Um, as much as I've always wanted to travel a little bit, but when you're kind of limited or keep yourself limited to a physical location, I feel like there's other means of exploring that wanderlust craving within you. And mention the idea to you guys like the cosmic wanderlust, and say you don't necessarily have the means of going out exploring the wilderness or the world the way you'd like to, but you go into the inner wilderness and the inner psyches and explore those a little bit. And I've done a lot of that, and um, I've done my own wandering, like I said, in my homeless years a lot, and just always been very attracted to that life. Um, you know, regardless of how deep one gets into it, I feel like we can all come to a lot of similar outcomes through various means of exploring that wanderlust syndrome and what that exploration can translate to us. And I thought a funny note too, wanderlust comes from a German word for love of hiking.
Yeah,
I
there
thought
will be a
that,
lot of hiking in this episode, so that's
yeah.
fitting. Yeah, and yeah, tip of the hat to the great Every Time I Die song, Wanderlust. I know that's a mutual
Oh
favorite of ours.
yeah,
So Seed Person, I know, you know, you I can't remember, and I paused because I don't know, you might not even want to elaborate specifically like where, but you have spent quite a bit of time for one reason or another living in the wilderness to basically very Thoreauish. You were except Thoreau had it easy, and that's kind of what I did a little more. I want to hear what you did first, but I had my own time in the woods, but you really did like the survivalist thing for a little bit.
Yeah, so since I was a little kid, the idea of being outside in the woods in nature, it was always appealing to me. I did Boy Scouts when I was a kid. When you're talking about different people and talking about like specifically Chris McCandless in the book and thinking about books, when I was a kid, I read My Side of the Mountain. I don't know if y'all know that book or that book series, but
I don't think
it's a
so.
bit about a young boy who runs away from home and takes a bus and disappears into the woods and lives inside a hollowed out tree. And he's like surviving through the winter and like killing animals to eat and makes his own clothes out of like a deer hide and shit. And then I think in the third book, I think he trains a falcon. Like by the end of the story, he's got like a trained falcon that hunts for him and shit. But
Dope.
it really always appealed to me, that idea of like going out and like, this is my space, I'm living with nature, so
I bet you guys read Hatchet as a kid,
yeah,
didn't you?
Hatchet was a
Yeah,
good book
that's
too.
making me think
Yeah,
of that.
that's like
Classic.
the plane crash and he has to survive and shit. Yeah.
Shit, I didn't even think of that making the notes, but man, that's like full on for the theme for sure.
Um.
But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, and then Boy Scouts, I did that for a long time, specifically in the area of wilderness survival was a lot of my interest. And then I did. I worked for the Conservation Corps, and I lived in Montana and Idaho. We did a lot of stuff out in the wilderness, like hike miles out into the wilderness where there's been like a wildfire, and then rebuild the trails, like camp out there in the burn zones and shit, and then dig out the trails by hand, because you can't take any motors into the wilderness, or nothing with wheels is allowed. So we had to like take mules out there and shit.
Damn.
And like hand saws for like logs and whatever, because you can't use a chainsaw because it's got a motor, so shit like that.
Wow.
Then I also did a training in Missouri, where we were doing specific wilderness survival, like the hardcore shit. Like the final test, we had to you could take a big knife and a little knife and the clothes that you were wearing, and you had to go out in the woods for a week and like build a shelter, start a fire, like catch food, make rope, like all this stuff. Um,
Wow.
yeah, we started with 20 people and only like 7 people graduated.
Damn, dude, you're like the most Bear Grylls-ish person I know, maybe.
Bear Grylls was
Other
also
than
like a big inspiration for me when I was a kid too. So
right on, yeah. Okay, and you got to make it up to Alaska one day.
I would love to.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll freaking bring you up there. But yeah, that's wild. Doing hard labor out in the woods is a whole extra level. I spent time in the on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska for a spring and a summer, and which is like world class fishing area, and it's lush. Like it looks not exactly the same, but almost like New Zealandish in the summer, like Lord of the Rings, like just beautiful, green everywhere, and there's the wildlife is great, um, and it's there's you meet people from all over the world around there, so it's interesting in the summer. It's desolate in the winter. It is a bleak, just it, just frozen over wasteland. So I hitchhiked out there. No, I went out there with my friend, but I ended up hitchhiking back and forth a lot, which I don't recommend anyone does. I never had any problems, but I was just young and dumb. And prepared. I think I was angry enough to make it not worth someone's time to fuck with me, but so I like to think I was prepared, but you never know. You shouldn't hitchhike anyway. But so I did that, and I lived in a tent in the woods behind a restaurant in Cooper Landing, on this peninsula. And the restaurant is basically just everything is in the woods. Even if it's a building, it's in the woods because Cooper Landing is just some strips of slight civilization down the only road going to any of the towns up ahead. Because there are some reasonably populated towns like Kenai and stuff, but not like nothing crazy going on. So I kind of had like a Thoreau thing going on. I was working in the kitchen, and I got like most of my meals from the kitchen, but I lived in a tent out there, and you're right in the thick. It's not like the city is like, in the patch of woods right next door. So, but I wasn't doing any sort of hard labor like that in the woods. So, but I really enjoyed the simplicity and the asceticism of it, and I really leaned into it. So that said, we all have a little bit of that wanderlust taste, and some names here I have for you guys is so we talked about Chris McCandless. I mean, we'll continue because he's kind of like, at least in my mind, an analysis point for a lot of these different people. But there's also the poet Everett Ruse, who disappeared when he was 20 years old. Um, Quite a bit of a romantic. There's not a whole lot of tragedy to his story, except for the end. It's quite a mystery. We also have Carl McCunn, which is a story that I just have to preface with the fact that I feel bad for this dude. I have, the utmost reverence for the fact that he was a victim, but like there's so much. It is an unbelievable amount of facepalm that he even admitted in his own diaries. And a lot of these are in Alaska. McCunn is one that was in Alaska. It's a crazy story. John Waterman, an alpinist who was very eccentric, like just almost like an Adult Swim character, like at times, and he ended up disappearing. We have Gene Rossellini, who I've mentioned a couple times on the show before, but we got to bring him up. Um, which is a guy that just disappeared for a while purposefully into the woods of Alaska and tried to live like a Stone Age human being for like 10 years. We have Timothy Treadwell, the Grizzly Man. Werner Herzog made the documentary about him. And then we also have a guy named Nathan Campbell, which I haven't dived into much in these episodes, but we did bring him up, Jesse Desmond and I, in our conversation about the Dark Pyramid of Alaska, because this guy in 2020 took a plane out to look for the fucking Dark Pyramid and was never found. And then also, just as honorable mentions, we have, I said Ted Kaczynski as like the real dangerous crazy side. I think you might even be able to fit Charlie Manson in there potentially. Then you have John Muir as an exemplary figure. And then also, for whatever it's worth, just because people know him, and I do think he fits into the collage here, fucking Aaron Ralston, 127 hours. What kind of lunatic? Talk about wanderlust syndrome. Just wanders off without telling anybody, and like, what a crazy scenario. We probably won't talk about that one much because that's really well known, but like I said, it is worth bringing up. And as a final wild card, didn't even expect to bring this up, but I heard, so this also probably won't be a huge focus, but I heard a time suck with Dan Cummins podcast episode recently where he brought this guy up. This guy, when Germany owned an island, like a New Guinea island, I'm not a fucking geographer, but it was in the 1800s. This guy was a German who ended up moving there and started a really half-baked cult, subsisting or just living on the beach, doing nothing really at all, like total beach bum cult. And the only thing you subsisted off of was coconuts. And you cannot subsist off of coconuts. Let's just say that to start with. It did not end well for this dude. And then you also mentioned train hopping. What a dark culture the more you get into it. I didn't expect to bring this up, but you mentioned it, so I'll throw it into the kaleidoscope we have going on here. Carl Panzram is a little known serial killer with a lot of literature on him that was a hobo train drifter serial killer. So add that to the list of wanderlust that is very evil. Panzram, I'd actually like to do an episode on at some point. He is a monolithic evil figure like Kuklinski or something like that.
Never heard him before.
Oh man, yeah. We'll talk about. Well, I'd be happy to talk about him more, but we'll do an episode at some point. There's enough to do an episode on, but
there's an old Criminal Minds episode about a serial killer who is a train hopper, and that's how they figure out where he's going to strike next. Is it's like a house next to the train tracks and shit like that. So yeah, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah,
and like all the hobo signs and stuff, and like these people are friendly and shit, and these people they'll chase you off. And
yeah, well, in the Panzram story, all that included, and like getting beat up by guards, I didn't realize how much sexual abuse was involved in train hopping. Like, people are fucking brutal out there. But it was a surprising amount. So we'll tiptoe around that when we talk about Panzram. But so first off, what do you guys? You probably don't remember all the names I tossed out, but do you want some thought-provoking shit? Do you want something that is batshit crazy? Where would you guys like to start?
I love batshit crazy, but I'm always down for whatever. And real quick, when you said Aaron Ralston, I thought you were going to say Aaron Rodgers.
No, and wait for the commercial break on that one, folks. But all right, but yeah, we're gonna get into Carl McCune first. But firstly, to give due to everyone, to the wanderlust syndrome, I think whether it's McCandless, McCune, all these people where shit goes wrong, even someone like Carl Panzram, they started out just being a kid trying to make their way, and then he eventually became this brutal monster. But there's the transcendentalist intentions, and most of the time they're really into specifically transcendentalism, but even if not, they carry that with them. So I just wanted to read some quotes that I'm sure people have heard before. One, there's a good chance you haven't, but sets the tone just a little bit. These are a couple from Walden by Thoreau. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city you go into the desperate country and have to control yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And on the more brooding side, I've read this quote in one episode before somewhere. This is from the old classic Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which I recommend to anybody, by Robert Pirsig. And it reads, along the streets that lead away from the apartment, he can never see anything through the concrete and brick and neon, but he knows that buried within it are grotesque, twisted souls, forever trying manners that will convince themselves they possess quality, learning strange poses of style and glamour vended by the dream magazines and other mass media and paid for by the vendors of substance. He thinks of them at night, alone with their advertised glamorous shoes and stockings and underclothes off, staring through the sooty windows at the grotesque shells revealed beyond them. When the poses weaken and the truth creeps in, the only truth that exists here, crying to heaven, God, there is nothing here but dead neon, cement, and brick. And I think, you take those three quotes right there, and who wouldn't have a little bit of wanderlust syndrome? Like, I chose those three quotes because those have stuck with me ever since I first read them. So I think there's a lot of reason, like, you shouldn't be afraid, for lack of a better term, of wanderlust syndrome, the fool's journey, if you will. But you have to understand that it's a genuine journey, and there's danger involved in any journey. And we still haven't gotten into any stories yet, but I'm not in a rush. I know you guys aren't either. I wanted to bring this up too, because this adds a bit of a metaphysical flavor to it. This is all very hermetic, the fool's journey, but there's also the whole wilderness. There's the call of the wilderness. There's the disassociation, and we're going to talk about some genuine horror of the wilderness too. And Pan encapsulates all of those things. Even before he was like demonized in the Christian metaphysics, he always had that hermetic sort of tricksterish element in some ways. And in the Goblin universe, the book by Ted Holiday, I have an episode where I talk about it with Soraya and AP Strange. He mentions this curious thing that as soon as I read it, I thought of Chris McCandless. And honestly, it helped me kind of build this, just understanding the archetype more. I was familiar with similar names, but just, again, adds a little metaphysical flavor. So let's see here. Pan, the goat-footed god, is not so funny when you encounter him, however. This is from the Goblin universe. The chief symptom of being in the presence of Pan is panic, which the Oxford Dictionary defines as unreasoning and excessive terror, the Greek panikos, of where Pan was first described. And in Scotland, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, Um, but on a fine day in May of 1945, yeah, it was a Scottish dude's name. Densham climbed to the top of Ben MacDooey, something like that, and reached the summit soon after noon. As he was admiring the view, a mist came down, so he sat down and started eating sandwiches. I'm reading this from my phone, so bear with me, y'all. After a time, he heard crunching footsteps and sensed a presence. At first, he put the footsteps down to noises caused by the expansion and contraction of rocks. When the sounds approached, um, he went over to investigate. When he got within a few feet of the apparent source of the footsteps, an inexplicable terror gripped him, and he rushed at an incredible rate toward the precipice known as Lurcher's Crag, deflecting himself with difficulty from what could have been a death plunge. He continued his flight all the way down the ridge. And this was a very experienced, like esteemed alpinist. How many accidents have been caused by climbers meeting Pan is not known, but terrified running on a mountain is likely to silence the victim forever. Surprisingly, no mountaineering club has ever systematically collected information on the topic. The phenomenon is certainly not localized, though, and it seems clear that there are many mysteries in the mountains. As a basic definition, the Pan effect, as he called it, is basically a dangerous psychological phenomenon with the victim fleeing wildly from something he cannot see. It may or may not be connected with the cult pixie footprints. I'm not sure what that is. Some other reference in the book. Yet it is hard to completely separate from the gigantic ape-man-like figure seen by others. The problem is to connect these effects. And that's where he starts talking about the interconnected goblin universe theme. But the idea, I talk about the siren archetype in Dive Manual, how something that seems so perfect and beautiful could potentially be the most vicious and like lead to your own downfall. And this Pan effect seems to be, I love the archetypal quality of that panic essence. So I don't know where all that goes, but I think that is some really good food for thought here.
I know where it goes.
Yeah.
This is blowing my mind
All
because
right.
let me tell you, you told us, okay, here's the subject that we're going to be doing on this episode. That was like a week ago or whatever, 2 weeks ago. And I was like, I need to look some stuff up. But I didn't do that. Instead, I went and rewatched Hellier just for fun. And the whole point of that show at the end is that it's all the call to Pan, right? They're supposed to do the ritual and invoke Pan.
No shit.
So yeah, so all I've been listening and watching for the last like week is stuff about Pan. And then I was
Wow.
like, because of Hellier, I went and re-listened to the Mothman prophecies, and there's a little snippet in there, and he's over by the TNT area, John Keel is, and he's driving, and as he's driving, he gets to a point where he starts feeling terror, just like unrestrained terror. And then he keeps driving. About 15 feet later, it's gone. So he stops and he gets out and he walks back through that section. And as he gets into it, he starts feeling this extreme terror, this panic, this feeling of overwhelming fear. And about 15 feet later, it's gone. And so he's on one side and his car's on the other side of this section of fear. And he's like, I'm just going to stand here for the rest of the night because I don't want to walk back through there.
Yeah.
But he makes himself do it and he gets to his car. And that's totally what made it's like, it feels like this is
Wow.
all very connected from like the shit
Yeah.
that I've been thinking about, but not on purpose. It's all unintentional.
That's beautiful. Yeah, good reminder about Hellier too. I'm very familiar with the new Kirks, but I actually haven't checked out Hellier yet. I know it's been recommended to me, so a fun synchronicity is always some good motivation to check something out. So maybe that'll be up on the horizon for me soon. Chris, you got any thoughts before we do some character study here?
Well, when he was just talking about the John Keel aspect and that like 15, feet that was seemingly, leading to a fucking unexplicable terror, started making me think of the idea of like ley lines and certain like
Yeah.
energetic grids governed by these, archetypal energies. But as far as like why this specific spot, I very curious about that. But when you were talking also too, it was just making me think of times when I've been out in the forest and you're at peace and it's serene, and then all of a sudden it's almost like a claustrophobic sensation of like, the woods go silent, and then you realize like how fucking small you are out in this deep dense forest, and
Yeah.
the feeling of eyes on you and shit that
One
so
wrong
I get
turn and you're just swallowed up by it.
yeah, and it hits you out of nowhere, and like maybe it's an aspect of crossing one of these potential energetic grids, ley lines, or a certain energetic force that is um, relegated to a certain area of the forest you're in. You happen to capture its attention somewhat, but it also just like the idea of the forest as being a metaphor for the chaos of the psyche too. It's like it can go from being so peaceful and serene to chaotic panic and just a matter of a footstep sometimes, and the
Really
whole
can. Yeah. It's
the whole
wild.
angle flipped on its head.
Well, before I bring up McCoon, everyone is so familiar with McCandless. He's been brought up in other episodes. So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on him. We could start with you, Chris. How I take it is it's a bittersweet story. I really love the guy's intentions and his motivations, and I think this, we want to call it a pan effect. Something kicks in where, like, maybe the pan effect doesn't describe everything. I'm not saying it does, but it's a piece of the puzzle here, because that seems to talk about like an immediate panic where you talk about where it's just in a moment, like something just it's something about the wilderness. But there's also a slow trickle where these guys, and I have this in my notes, I'm remembering it now. It's almost like in a completely different way, like a serial killer frenzy, where these guys are slowly working themselves up on all these exotic adventures, and in a lot of cases even they're adrenaline junkies and upping the ante. And then they get into this frenzy where so often they're making mistakes that they shouldn't be making. It almost reminds me of Ted Bundy talking about, like, you do so many of these and after a while you just forget, like, oh, where did I put that wrench again? And then things just blur together and slowly start to slip up. And like, as an alpinist, climbing some of the world's most treacherous mountains or shit like that, when you get into that frenzied state where you're just looking for the high and forgetting where you put the proverbial wrench, you're fucked. So, and that's what happened with McCandless. I feel like he had a lot of good, I can relate to a lot of where he's coming from, and then shit just got real dark.
Yeah, I feel like maybe in that position you're on the road so long and adventuring so long, like you said, an aspect of it I think is the adrenaline. You have to keep topping that, but you seems like some of these people start to feel like invincible after a little while, and the ego of the journey kind of gets the better of them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think
And
you're right.
when you're doing something, when you're like traveling like that so freely and anarchic mindset, I think people can kind of forget the importance of boundaries, and that it's fun to chase the adrenaline, but um in a way that's you could say certain aspects of our psyche, demons feed off of that, and you feed, not that it's an adrenaline is necessarily a negative thing, but you lose yourself in it, and
Yeah.
you just you it's another way of losing touch with reality in a sense. And kind of like I was saying, that like the panic effect, being out in the forest can go from you can go from feeling so serene and one with it in one moment, and then kind of it swallows you whole, and it next thing you know, it's too fucking late. And um I don't know, with the Chris McCandless too, like you were saying, yeah, I really respect the intent behind his pursuit. Especially like, the upbringing he came from. Like, I do admire that he kind of just like he saw that having so much and having everything was very unsatisfying and unfulfilling to the internal part of him. And but again, it's I think it's hard to maintain or remember about finding balance when you're constantly adventuring and
Yeah.
working towards becoming, you don't even know what the end result's going to be. You kind of just lose yourself in uh, another form of that panic, chaotic frenzy, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's more of it can be more of a slow trickle. And then there's examples of it being like an immediate realization of like, oh shit, we've gone too far and there's no returning now. But
And I think that's how it was for McCandless. He made a bad move going out with such limited supplies, but if I don't know, there are certain decisions he could have made, crossing over the river sooner when it wasn't over flooded. You're just walking further down to find other outlets. That river was a lot of the issue of why he stayed longer and ended up getting, more desperate for resources and eating something that poisoned him. Either that or he just simply ran out of resources, but it's very likely he was poisoned by himself accidentally. And yeah, there's just that moment where you're like, oh man, I'm fucked. Especially because he even thought he was poisoned. So that's the most likely cause. And he was foraging and ate a part of a plant that he wasn't supposed to because another part was edible. And then at a certain point, you just realize, oh, I'm fucked. I'm completely fucked now. I'm not strong enough to even make it over that river now. Like I literally am just have to accept that I'm going to starve to death out here.
yeah, dude, what's really cool about this too, actually, not to cut you off, but the first time you had me on, we started talking about Christopher McCandless and this aspect of how it ended up for him. And you had mentioned how you're like, down the line, you're like, I plan on doing an episode based around him. And
Nice.
on
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah.
and last Sunday too, I was poking around my books and I found my copy of Dive Manual, and we were going to record this last Sunday. But you had stuff going on. But I remember I opened the book, and the second page I flipped it to saw the name Christopher McCandless, and then I did a quick flip and tried to go back and find it, but I couldn't. But I feel like there's something else I was going to say about that. But um, yeah, actually I remember commenting on how the way he ended up dying and having that realization is kind of like its own kind of hell, but how he was able to transcend that and kind of come having to sit there on that bus knowing you're going to die, and like, where does the mind go in a situation like that? Like, none, it's one of those things you can speculate about it, but I don't think any of us could really know until if we were in that situation. But it seems like, from the upbringing he came from, like, that is a very ironic way of him finding heaven and transcendence and accepting his mistakes with humility, and writing in like that last picture he took,
Yeah.
like,
He seemed
um
genuinely at peace. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty beautiful. It's as much of
Yeah.
a hellish scenario as it was. But yeah, I just
And
thought
isn't
of
that
that.
what transcendentalism is all about? Yeah,
Yep.
truly.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Seed Person, about Alexander Supertramp?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different ways that I could go with this. I guess in that case, I think pushing himself that hard, and like that's where the mistakes are made when you're going like to the edges of what you're capable of, like, and
Yeah.
then you do make those simple mistakes, like okay, so when I did that survival training, the last night of the testing phase, a dude burned his whole shelter down.
Ooh.
Like set his shit on fire, all of it, and like huge fire. So, and it wasn't like he was like one of the most experienced survivalists in the group. It was just a sloppy mistake, you know. He wasn't paying attention and let it get too big. So, you know, I think that's it. But I think a lot of this wanderlust syndrome, there's different reasons for it, I think, and at its core, you're either escaping societal constrictions for something more basic, or you are going out to appreciate the natural world. And like, you know, it's one is to get away and one is to go find, and different reasons lead to different results. I think if you're living at your most basic, really humans only need 4 different things: shelter, water, fire, and food. And you're gonna live, right? And that's a really, really easy mindset to live in. I gotta get shelter, I gotta get water, I gotta get fire, I gotta get food. I don't have to worry about my fucking taxes. I don't have to worry about pumping gas. I don't have to worry about you know, scam calls on my cell phone. Like none of that shit is a part of living wild. And it's really freeing mentally and emotionally. So, but there are, you know, when you are out there, nature as a force is always going to win. And I think that if you want to talk metaphysically, it'll keep you in check. Once you start getting a little bit too cocky or think that you're, you know, oh, I got this shit. I'm living wild. I'm fat and happy, and then you get a fucking tornado, you know, or
Yeah.
some shit. Because that's I actually slept through. Or I didn't sleep, but we had a tornado come right above us when we were out there. It was like crazy fucking experience, but nature is
Yeah.
always going to put you in check. And I think if you're not fully prepared for that, then that's also where, you know, things can happen.
Very well put. I like the distinction between seeking and trying to escape. That's a good um that's a very good distinction. Um Also felt like, for whatever it's worth, it's not, there's plenty to sink our teeth into here, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but the idea, especially when it becomes an escape kind of thing, it almost becomes this Captain Ahab kind of energy, just this obsession of in pursuit of something. So yeah, open ended, but we're honing in on something, whatever it is here. So this guy, Carl McCunn, he was born in 1947, died in 1981. Okay. He um he is one of the comparisons that John Krakauer makes to Chris McCandless in the book Into the Wild. And McCunn himself lived in Alaska for a lot of his adult life and died there. Um so and he was a photographer, and he was pretty good at it. He was pretty successful. He made enough money. You know, I'm not an expert on Carl McCunn. There's a good chance he was in the military if he was even up in Alaska, especially at that time. So he had enough money to go on this interesting little excursion, and he went to um I got a lot of notes in here. I don't even Colleen River, but man, I can't even tell you is specifically where that is in Alaska. It doesn't matter. Most of it is the fucking wilderness. And he went in March. Um, and he planned to stay there until August. So he had like a float plane drop him off, and he landed with a lot of supplies, an overabundance of supplies in some cases. There's certain things where, you know, he's being indulgent with his food. He's even there's a quote in here. Here it is. Um, he thought back to the shotgun that shells that he had disposed of months earlier. Quote, had 5 boxes when I kept and when I kept seeing them sitting there, I felt rather silly having bought so many. I felt like a warmonger. So I threw it all away into the lake, except for about a dozen, real bright. Yeah, yeah. So not good. It gets a lot worse too. So by the time he's because this is the issue. When August rolls around, he starts having a creeping suspicion that he was not clear enough about his return date to his pilot. You'd think that would be like a really clutch, crucial I don't know, piece of scheduling in your excursion, going to the remote wilderness. I don't know if he completely forgot, or if he didn't impress it enough. It was just like it's like one of those things where he was like,
It's like, oops, I forgot to schedule my flight back, like out of here. It's just a one-way fucking flight, and I threw all my shotgun shells in the lake. Yeah, this is awesome. Are you serious?
like I wonder if he's like talking to the pilot as they're going out there flying, and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna come back and get me, right?" The guy's like, can't hear him. He's just nodding. He's like, "Yeah, I got whatever, man. Shut up. I can't hear you." Oh my God. So God bless this poor man. He didn't seem he's not a bad guy, but Jesus Christ.
That's
Not a
not
bright guy.
No. So August comes around and yeah, there's no one around. So he's starting to really get concerned. He's counting his limited shotgun shells. Um, he's not really an experienced hunter or anything. He tries hunting and it just doesn't really work out. Like he tries to shoot like a wolf and it runs away and different things. And here's the very sad cherry on the sundae. So when he didn't show up, worried friends asked the Alaska State Troopers to check on McCoon as summer came to an end, and he still hadn't returned home. So Trooper David Hamilton flew over McCoon's camp. They knew where he was. They flew over McCoon's camp and saw McCoon waving a red bag. He said he circled McCoon, who was waving this bag in a quote unquote casual manner. Believing this indicated that he wasn't in danger, Hamilton flew away. McCoon wrote in his journal that he was elated when he saw the plane. However, this elation soon turned to horror when McCoon looked at distress calls printed on the back of his hunting license and realized that he had given the signal for all okay, do not wait. And he fucking died out there in December.
I don't mean to be laughing so hard, but this is just, it's so sad, but so easily avoidable. Like, and not to cut you off, but
I know, I'm shocked too, and I know the story.
Steve was saying, like, the Wanderlust syndrome as a means of like escapism from societal misgivings or something. But like this sounds like a case of someone like with an inflated ego, kind of going out as an escapism from figuring out some shit inside themselves. Like,
Yeah, he just went to go take photos. Yeah.
yeah,
I think it makes me think of like a proving something, or like trying to like prove that he's like, I'm a tough guy, like I'm gonna go live in the woods, and and then he's sitting there by himself, and this doesn't seem like a person that's like very in tune with themselves, and the decisions that he makes. So maybe he's sitting there and he's got a lot of time to think, and that can fuck people up, in the head if you're just sitting there by yourself and nobody to talk to. And yeah, and
It's like,
already like struggling with trying to prove something to yourself, or struggling with something internally, like Chris said. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
like having a bunch of yes men around, but just in your own head, and nobody to really fucking check you. But then, yeah, there you go, having nature, checking him on the hierarchy of things. Like, hey, you should have come a little more equipped and done some inner work and not, it seems like a case of someone, that idea of wanderlust through means of escapism, but from like, again, themselves, but thinking they're this whole other version of themselves, and they got fucking humbled in a very, very unfortunate way. I don't mean to make such like light of this, but it's just
it's shocking. It's okay to laugh as long as you understand the gravity of it too, because I cannot help but laugh. That's why I put it in here. It's mind-boggling. You can't believe it's a real story. It's just what it boils down to.
What did this guy do for a living?
He was a photographer.
Okay. Like a wilderness photographer, like by trade?
I believe so. Yeah. But I feel like he also had some military relation. I can let me look and just see what I mean. A brief Google search lists him as a photographer. So
a series of unfortunate events, as we call it a visit from the screw up fairy. Where one thing leads to another, and it's just like a domino effect of mistakes.
Big time.
That distress call part ending is just like,
oh, it's nuts.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. Holy shit.
And then he just kind of he's got journal entries where he just has like a last day. It's not just a last meal. It's like there's a quote where he says something like, "This is the last of my fire starter," and because it was December, thing is, everything you're gonna be hard pressed to find anything to be able to light. It's winter time. So he's like, when this fire cools out, I'm gonna be cooling out with it, and that was it. He rode his supplies out as long as he could. He tried to hunt and didn't get anywhere with it and just fucking died out there. Like he even had a head start and he couldn't make it happen. I mean, fucking it's tough. I don't blame him, but I mean, all these other mistakes, unfortunately they are squarely on his shoulders. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to read those journals because I feel like that's such a unique energy to be caught in and be writing in. So I feel like reading that has probably a certain energy signature attached to it that's pretty powerful and can kind of, have you empathize with him a little bit. Maybe I'll have to check those out for sure.
Yeah, and you should. You can definitely find him.
Hooey, boy. Dang old man. It's Tippy Patson, y'all, and I apologize. It's been a little while since I've given y'all an update, but there's been a whole hell of a lot going on. Y'all know that I've been in here in New York City with Aaron Rodgers, NFL quarterback who is injured. I've been helping him out a bit with spiritual mentorship, and we started a band. I got him smoking cigarettes, drinking aluminum infused water, with them electrolytes and all sorts of stuff. But I started hearing rumors as I've been staying around here that there are a bunch of them gators in the sewers. So what we do, after band practice one day, Aaron Rodgers and I, we went ahead and popped open one of them manholes and jumped on in with some flashlights and some shotguns, and we had a good old time for a while. We even found a couple gators. The thing is though, y'all, I'm sorry to report I dang old lost Aaron Rodgers in the sewer. I'm kind of laying low on this one because I feel like a few people are gonna be pretty fucking mad at me. But I told him, follow me, stay real close, don't take that corner, quit running after all them rodents. They ain't your friend. But he did, and he ran that corner real fast, and god damn it, I can't find. I haven't been able to find him. So God bless Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully he don't become some sort of vermin swamp sewer creature down there. I made it out of the sewer. I decided, I've just been holed up with Aaron this whole time, and I know he'd want me to live life to the fullest. So I started trying to sample some New York City life a little more. But dang old man, everyone gets so mad at me. They offer me rides in these yellow cars. They give me food at these fancy spots, and then I hop in the car, I eat the food, and then people get mad when I dang old, what do you want from me? Why are you offering me things if I can't have them? I don't know, y'all. I don't know about this whole windy Apple City. I think I'm just gonna be heading back to the Everglades, y'all. It's been an interesting vacation, but I'm about done with this, So God bless Aaron Rodgers, hopefully he makes, friends with them vermin down there. But y'all, Tippy Patson's out. Hopefully next time you hear from me, I'll be back in my home in the Everglades. Y'all take it easy. Wish me luck.
Hey, ho, yeah. This is Jeff Mamba, Mind Jockey. How's everybody doing today? In case you forgot, I'm a pretty classy, movie critic. I'm a former Illuminati cloning lab manager. And I'm a jockey for your mind now. So there's a lot going on, but I've got a situation here. I'm the only guy holding the fort down here in the Everglades for the League of Extraordinary Gents, and waiting for Tippy Patson to come back. Everyone else is gone. The DMT muscle guy turned into the pirate and flew into the sky. It was fucking crazy, but I've just been kind of going stir crazy. And last time that I talked to you, I was talking about like how the tradesmen are the Illuminati families. There's like the infernal electrician and the eternal plumber and all these different people. Well, I actually, long story short, I called some people over, and as a ruse, a bit of a honeypot. And now I have, for the last couple days, I have an electrician and a plumber tied up in a shack here in the Everglades. And I think I'm gonna torture them. But hey, hear me out. I'm gonna torture them for information, okay? But also, like, I'm not really like a blood and guts kind of guy. I don't even really like the Saw movies, so I'm thinking more like I'll like just talk to them a bunch. What do people not like to hear? I'm sure they would not enjoy hearing extensively about my childhood. Maybe if I cry a lot, I think the idea is just to make them so uncomfortable that they would like to just leave. And if that doesn't work, maybe we'll try some waterboarding. Otherwise, I'm not sure. I could try cutting their hair or something like that. But if anybody has any ideas, I'm not really in a rush either, to be honest. So just go ahead and like give me some ideas, and then maybe I will use some of those ideas. Okay. All right. Well, I should maybe consider like feeding these guys or something. Listen, hear me out. I know it sounds bad, but like these guys are super evil. They're like part of the Illuminati. So don't worry. We're gonna get to the bottom of this. Jeff Mamba, Mind Jockey, over and out.
Has gravity got you down? Do you not understand the difference between a wave or a particle? What about the planets? How do all those rotate around each other? Laws of physics and other sciences can be confusing. So the next time you're curious just how exactly E equals MC squared, hire a highly trained and qualified professional. That's right, it's space lawyers. Space lawyers are skilled in litigation with the laws of time, space, cosmic ghost pirates, and various other lawyerings. Each space lawyer has a PhD in space law from the Cosmic Hall of Space Justice, and they can get you out of just about any sticky situation. So stop bonking your head on things, or accidentally creating big bangs with your haphazard studies in quantum physics. Leave all of that to the highly trained professionals prepared to litigate these laws for you. Just call 1-800-SpaceLawyer.com for more info.
Space lawyer?
Space lawyers cannot be used in a regular court of law. They can only accept cash and no cosmic traveler checks nor Visa debit cards. Please wait up to 4 cosmic business days for our space lawyers to get back to you.
Arg, matey! It is I, Apex Monsoon. And I am a cosmic ghost pirate, and I travel the 7 cosmic seas, and it's kind of like Scott Bakula and Quantum Leap, except I'm like jumping around on ghost ships throughout the cosmos, and in case you haven't heard, it's pretty sweet. There's a lot of adventuring going on, but I have an important announcement to make. Fuck space lawyers and all of their lawyerings. I don't approve. They've put so many of my friends in jail, and we, despite what Earthlings think of pirates, are pretty cool dudes, like we're not just scallywags. We're more like Green Lantern type people. We're really badass. So, don't join the space lawyers. Apex Monsoon wants you to be a cosmic ghost pirate. So, the first steps are contacting the number at the bottom of your screen and get a hold of my secretary, Christina. She is also a cosmic ghost pirate, and she's very nice. So go ahead and get a hold of her right now. Arg! And, I really don't want to hear anyone going and hiring any space lawyers. Fuck those guys. So, yeah, Cosmic Ghost Pirate for life, right? Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I think that's a good way to end this. Okay, alright, Apex Monsoon is out of here. I gotta go sail the 7 seas. Alright, matey. Arg! Arg!
So, where would you guys like to go next? I'll give you some options here and remind you of some of the territory we got. Would you like to talk about Timothy Treadwell, the Grizzly Man, or Nathan Campbell, this guy that disappeared looking for the Dark Pyramid?
That sounds fun. But Steve,
Dark
go ahead.
Pyramid. Dark Pyramid sounds fun to me as well.
All
We're on
right,
the
all
same
right.
page.
I let me read you this. I'll have this article in the show description. I thought this encapsulated it very well. It is a very good launching off point. Secret bases, government cover-ups, global warfare, ancient aliens, pyramid power, all to create the story of the Black Pyramid. We call it the Dark Pyramid, but who gives a fuck, right? The story that Nathan Campbell, the man we're discussing here, if he followed any of that internet lore, surely planned his summer vacation around. No one knows for certain if Campbell believed any of this, but we do know that he was going out there because of this. He could have been a skeptic. He was apparently pretty tight-lipped. He wanted to keep things to himself, which makes me think that he was pretty serious about it, quite honestly. Like he felt like he was on a mission. He may have spent, so he was dropped off. This supposed coordinates are given by Linda Moulton Howe, from her research that you can find at earthfiles.org. In the Dark Pyramid episode, we talk about that. So there's probably nothing there. There might be maybe something there. I don't think there's a pyramid. And I don't have any stake in the claim, so more than likely there's probably not even anything there. But it ties into the history of Cold War struggle and early warning system communications in Alaska and them stumbling onto things, and so this guy, he got the coordinates are like 50 miles or so, something like that, west of Denali, who another person actually disappears on at some point. So a lot of these people in the same areas, and yeah, so he's around Denali, for context, and to read further, he may have spent a month poking around every clump of dwarf birch, looking for a secret door to the command center, or like a bad deer hunter trying to escape his nagging wife. Campbell's quest could have been an excuse for some alone time in the wilderness to tramp around in the woods on a mission that didn't really need a resolution. Regardless, somewhere out there, he got himself into trouble. Travel in any direction from Carey Lake would have been slow, difficult, and dangerous. Did Campbell surprise a bear, fall into a beaver pond, or get into a freak snowstorm? No one knows. All we have to go on are scattered testimonies and fragments of evidence. Before the plane left, Campbell gave his charter pilot, Jason Sturgis, instructions to pick him up at Carey Lake in mid-September. See, he knew how to do proper scheduling there. Right before the onset of the Alaskan winter, right? Yeah, he knew how to time it too. After that, Sturgis hopped in his plane and flew back to Talkeetna. That was the last time anyone saw Campbell alive. Sometime in mid-June, Campbell's satellite texts stopped. His wife contacted Sturgis, who later, who told her to call a company flying helicopters to check the site of Campbell's last transmission. The results of her calls, or if she tried a search, are apparently unknown. It was until Campbell missed September 15th, his pickup date, that officials sent a search team to Carey Lake. After a few days beating through the bush, literally, rangers found some of Campbell's gear, cracked food bins, moldy clothes, a battered tent, but no signs of the Wasilla native. Wasilla being very close to where I grew up. The only clues were the rodent-chewed remnants of his diary buried in his tent. The last entry, dated sometime in late June, simply stated, "Went to get water." Then he simply disappeared, and that's it. So what the fuck? That's a weird one. What do you guys think?
I love to go down conspiratorial angles, but in what you were reading, you mentioned like Did he fall in a beaver trap? Like, imagine it being one of the most underwhelming outcomes for what actually happened. But I just love the idea of the Dark Pyramid up there and tied into potential underground bases, military goings ons, and
Yeah.
it also makes me think of like the national forests, like the missing 411 disappearance type of stuff.
That's a good point.
Which there's so many angles to speculate on that shit with, and you could even tie it back into where certain ley lines, certain energy grids naturally on the Earth that I don't know, maybe act as portals, fucking pull people into like a micro pocket dimension or some shit. Who knows? But it sounded like with him being tight-lipped about what he was doing, he was probably someone who was into this, these more fringe theories because anyone that would go investigate that, even though it's good to have some people in the know, you understand that you don't want to run your mouth too much, and you don't want too much chatter being attached to you about that because maybe he was onto something. And I feel like there's more and more pyramids being discovered and random places, and that's something that's just always been fascinating to me. And I don't know, I almost always like to think too, like in connection with potential underground bases, like pyramids being like the capstones of some like giant obelisks that are buried under the fucking earth or some shit.
Yeah. The Dark Pyramid is said to be underground at 4 times the size of Giza. So, yeah, talk about monolithic.
That's insane, man.
Yeah, a little too good to be true. But like I said, I'm open to the idea. That's how disinformation works. It's like a lot of times, 90% of it is bullshit, but 10% of it there is truth to help sell it, and just to mindfuck people. That 10% is often that's true is often the craziest anyway. So really hard to understand with this information by design.
Yeah, it's good to not settle on like try to get attached emotionally to any of these outcomes when like playing with conspiracies and stuff. Because again, I feel like it's almost been something for me that's like I was thinking about this when listening to the episode you posted last week, your guys' second conversation, but how it's almost like certain truths will make their way out, and then the disinformation will inevitably be thrown to sway people off of the track and get them emotionally attached to shit. But I've always been into conspiracies, and I've found it to be more a means of, if you can depolarize yourself, it's a means of sharpening your discernment and learning to find these clues and see what the red herrings could potentially be. But the key factor being, don't get attached to any outcome, really, because all truthful but half truths, are they not?
Amen. So, what do you think about Mr. Nathan Campbell here, Seed Person?
So for the gentleman in particular, I have to go with first of all, is this location in the Alaska Triangle? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
So that would lean more towards like some sort of paranormal disappearance, at least, a more likely chance of that. But I still would go with Occam's razor, honestly, in the wilderness of Alaska, that if you found his gear all kind of torn up and strewn about, he probably, probably got hurt or eaten or attacked, or something natural happened that caused him, to die. And then the wilderness cleans up real quick, so you wouldn't probably find any remains. 411 stuff was something that I was thinking at first, but usually that's like more distinctive. You would find the clothes folded or something like that, where it just seemed like they kind of just like took off all their clothes and disappeared, and their gear is all nice and neatly stacked, or total vanishment. But if your stuff's there, it's kind of strewn around, some mice were eating your journal, like that would lean more towards like he left his camp and something happened, and then it just kind of got naturally disheveled.
Right. Good. Very good points.
But for the for the Black Pyramid, real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to say I think it makes me feel sort of disinfo-y. That's not a word, but I feel like it might be some sort of half-truth disinfo thing. Like maybe there's something going on out there that's a black site or secret or off the books, but they're gonna like let that kind of, they say, hey, we know this lady who writes paranormal shit, and before we like people start looking at this, we're gonna just kind of jump the gun and put out a crazy ass story. So if anybody's like hearing about it, like, oh no, that's just a rumor, that's just some crazy conspiracy shit, somebody's like, oh, I saw these helicopters flying in that direction, they're like, oh no, you're mistaken, that's some crazy conspiracy thing, like naturally puts like a tint to it.
Yeah, if I were to just give my best guess, open to anything being the real answer, that's kind of what I think. It would not surprise me if, for communication purposes, there happened to be some sort of black site out there. And although it does seem way more likely that he encountered some dangerous wildlife, I guess it does definitely leave room for a slight theoretical possibility that even if he didn't come across like the Dark Pyramid site, like maybe he stumbled across some weird black site and they just threw a bag over his head. Who knows?
Possible, man. Maybe he became the referee for the Alien vs Predator Pyramid.
That's what I was thinking too. No, I was thinking it's a Bigfoot breeding project up there somewhere.
Yeah, those fucking dogmen got him.
Oh man. Well, yeah. What a weird story. That is potentially the most mysterious. There's plenty of mystery to all these, but like we didn't even know a whole lot about that guy's intentions or motivations. Very strange. And again, for anyone, I think I mentioned it in the very beginning, but to reiterate that he disappeared in like 2020. So that's pretty recent. But let's talk about Everett Ruess a little bit. It might be Ruess. It's Ruess. I've been reading that name since I was a kid, and when you read something as a kid wrong, it just sticks with you anyway. So it's always Ruess in my head. But this kid was only 20 when he died, 1914 to 1934. He's become a little bit of a folk hero because he wrote a lot of journals, and he was also a really genuine dude. I think one of the most genuine people on this list. I think the only thing that you could give him shit for, and I mean, it all depends on the person with something like this, is he got, I think, all of his money just from his parents. Like he graduated, and back then school was a little different. Like he graduated early, did like whatever required school, and then pretty much just went out young, like, because his parents were also adventurous and always bringing him outdoors. So he, at some point, he just left home, and he did subsist on his own. But like, if he ever was fucked, his parents were going to send him some money. But he roughnecked it and just did the whole like transcendentalist, like the idealistic kind of American journeyman kind of thing, and went all over the place, mostly on the West Coast. And like I said, he wrote journals that that you can read. I remember having a paperback of one at some point, and he disappeared in Davis Gulch. I believe it's the Utah. I could Google it here real quick. But he was exploring the desert. Where is this? Yep, it is in Utah. And he inscribed, the final thing he put on the wall was like Nemo was here, which is the reference to Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and in Latin translates to no one. So I think
what's the name of the place again that he disappeared at?
Davis Gulch.
Okay, thanks.
And this guy, there's not a whole lot of like, there's no punchlines with the best of intentions, like, crazy shit in here, but he really, really embodies the archetype through and through. And I think he's one of the most romantical characters and if anyone's just interested and wants like a lighter Chris McCandless kind of story, definitely check out Everett. And he is mentioned in Into the Wild. And it's just an endearing, continuous mystery. He fucking disappeared. No one knows after he wrote that inscription on the wall of the Gulch Cave. He just went on further. They might have, I believe they found some of his stuff, like a hat or something. They didn't find like remains, not even like material remains of his shit, really. So it is quite a mystery. And there's a quote. I think I'm gonna have to pull it off my phone here. Basically, because some of these wouldn't carry over with how the technology was working, I took a selection of screenshots of my laptop. Yeah, let me go ahead and read this for you guys. This is from Into the Wild. The country surrounding Davis Gulch is a desiccated expanse of bald rock and brick red sand. Vegetation is lean, shade from the withering sun is virtually non-existent. To descend into the confines of the canyon, however, is to arrive in another world. Cottonwoods lean gracefully over drifts of flowering prickly pear. Tall grasses sway in the breeze, and so forth. I'll skip a little bit of that, even though it is done well. 6 decades ago, in this enchanting hideaway, less than a mile downstream from where the Mormon Steps meet the floor of the gulch. That's just a name for part of the gulch, the Mormon Steps. 20-year-old Everett Ruiz carved his nom de plume into the canyon wall below a panel of Anasazi pictographs. And he did so again in the doorway of a small masonry structure built by the Anasazi for storing grain. Nemo, 1934. And similar to what McCandless inscribed in the bus. And this, let me find it in here. Yes. This is a bit of just like a piece of appendix to the Everett Ruiz story. When I read this, I found it originally in Into the Wild, and I was like, man, this is not only gripping, but he's a pretty good writer too. So this, when I actually went out and bought his journals, and this is just, I think, speaks to the really like almost some Black Hoodie shit, like some really trying to suck the marrow out of life, like Thoreau was talking about, and just doing it head on, and maybe doing it a bit foolishly, but having some of the best intentions on this list and doing it almost like flawlessly. Like he didn't even have a whole, there was some, if you're going to do any adventuring out there, there's going to be some close calls, but his story is not insanely harrowing. But this is the kind of stuff you come across even when your story isn't insanely harrowing. For 2 days. So let me read this bit that builds up to it. Ruiz was undeterred by physical discomfort, John Krakauer writes, similar to McCandless, and at times he seemed to welcome it. Quote, for 6 days I've been suffering from the semi-annual poison ivy case that I get, and my sufferings are far from over, he wrote in a letter to a friend. For 2 days I couldn't tell whether I was dead or alive. I writhed and twisted in the heat, with swarms of ants and flies crawling all over me, while the poison oozed and crusted on my face and arms and back. I ate nothing. There was nothing to do but suffer philosophically. I get it every time, but I refuse to be driven out of the woods by it. So that's some shit right there.
I love that.
Yeah. He also wrote, as a final bit here, I've been thinking more and more that I shall always be a lone wanderer of the wilderness. God, how the trail lures me. You cannot comprehend its restless fascination for me. After all, The lone trail is the best. I'll never stop wandering. And when the time comes to die, I'll find the wildest, loneliest, most desolate spot there is. The beauty of this country is becoming part of me. I feel more detached from life and somehow gentler. I have some good friends here, but no one who really understands why I am here or what I do. I don't know of anyone, though, who would have more than a partial understanding. I have gone too far alone. I have always been unsatisfied with life as most people live it. Always, I want to live more intensely and richly. In my wanderings this year, I have taken more chances and had more wild adventures than ever before. And what magnificent country I have seen. Wild, tremendous wasteland stretches, lost mesas, blue mountains rearing upward from the vermilion sands of the desert, canyons 5 feet wide at the bottom and hundreds of feet deep, cloud bursts roaring down unnamed canyons, and hundreds of houses of the cliff dwellers abandoned years ago. Yeah. So serious adventure. He's almost got like some Indiana Jones vibes at times.
I love that. I love the I really connect to him saying so sometimes you walk so far alone on your own path that um is almost a point of no return to a certain extent of like relatability with the average world.
Yeah.
Makes me think of Siddhartha too. Like I've always kind of tongue in cheek referred to myself as a Siddharthan hermeticist. Um, so, but yeah, I dig that. I'm gonna have to get some of this guy's journals and shit. I love that.
What about Siddhartha? Does it make you think of? Because that's one I haven't tackled yet. I'm very familiar with it, but I have not read it.
So I read it a couple years ago, and it's deceivingly simplistic. It's Hermann Hesse, and it's based around the character that the actual Buddha character is based off of, and him and his Siddhartha and his friend. I can't think of his friend's name at this point. They go off on uh, a mission of self-discovery essentially, and they go it together. But Siddhartha keeps having this realization that like um, you can only go so far by following someone else's teachings. So like the Buddha didn't become the Buddha by following a dogmatic scripture. Like he carved his own path, and in turn, developed a bunch.
He really followed his own wanderlust a little bit too, leaving his comfort. That's something I thought about in the notes and haven't brought up yet because there's plenty to bring up. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that does fit into the archetype here.
Yeah, it's just the that story of you can I hesitate to use the word enlightenment ever, but you can get closest to a sense of enlightenment only through your own discoveries. And like that guy was writing in his journals, like I feel I've gone too far on my own path. Like you've carved out this own way and understanding of the world and yourself, and it's very foreign to a lot of people. And it also makes me think too of like I've read a lot that like high ranking quote unquote magicians like get to a certain point where it's just near impossible to understand their comprehension of the world and the way they kind of navigate through things. But it can be inspiring for other people. But yeah, we can only ever get so far in finding ourselves by following someone else's individually carved out path. So yeah, that book Siddhartha, I love it. I recommend it to everyone. It's a pretty easy read, but it's got a lot of rereadability, and one of those ones you can pick up 10 years down the road, and then, it'll resonate a little differently with you.
Excellent, excellent. What do you think about Everett here, Mr. Seed Person?
That's a true wanderlust. I think that would be like a true example of it. The kind of going through life as it's supposed to be experienced and not being tied to the day-to-day grind, I guess, and just sort of like living experience to experience for each new experience. But also, um, I think that dude probably should not have like scraped his name all over ancient Native American shit,
No
because that's
kidding.
probably why he disappeared.
Hey, I like that metaphysical
You know,
angle. Yeah.
but
Interesting.
Utah
Yeah.
is a place that has got some weird shit going on. That's why I asked what it was called, because I wanted to look at it on a map. But
Yeah.
yeah,
and
sorry, go ahead.
just to agree with you, I've sat with that story for so long because I read Into the Wild pretty young, growing up in Alaska. So I never really thought of that. But yeah, man, yeah, he might have picked up some bad juju doing that. That's possible.
Yeah, I think just the description of that what you read, that quote of how he feels like he's becoming one with the beauty of the land. I think that's a really good example of maybe the call of Pan as well. So I think he was a real like explorer of experience.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. I have a little bit here, just for informational purposes. Again, he's super well known, especially on the West Coast. There's like hospitals named after him and all this stuff. So we don't need to dwell on John Muir too much. But since Everett Ruse is a bit more of a pure example, I figured I'd read what little I have on Muir here.
Before we jump ahead, can I just make one more comment on Everett Ruse and kind of people like him?
Absolutely.
Just more of a fun thought experiment about where do these people go. And we were just talking about Siddhartha and the Buddha, and it made me think of the idea of the rainbow body. Like, what if some people, this is again really far out there, just throwing it out there, but what if some of these people do achieve some type of transcendence of sorts and kind of just vibrate out of this world, and it's not always a malevolent ending type of deal, but it's
man,
more of the
I
happy.
love it. I love it so much. That would be dope as fuck.
Yeah.
Everett Ruse might be one of the best contenders for that. If not for some maybe bad juju from his hasty inscriptions there. But yeah, for whatever it's worth, John Muir is a Scottish-born American naturalist and author. He's an environmental philosopher. He's considered a botanist and a zoologist. The guy's office was the wilderness. And he spent a lot of time in Yosemite, in the Sequoia National Park, and the Sierra Nevada mountains. And he's got a lot of written work out there that is philosophical and scientific. He did a lot of activism with those areas that he was surrounded in, and the Sierra Club, which is a prominent American conservation organization, was founded by him, and like I said, is still around to this day. So that dude's a champ for sure. He walked the walk and talked the talk. But let's see. Now might be a good time to knock out some smaller names here that I have just a little bit less on. Let's talk about John Waterman. He's another name from Into the Wild. And this is the guy that I said was almost like an Adult Swim character in a way. I found, so I reread what I found, what was written on him in Into the Wild. I did some additional research as well, and I found this old article, this newspaper article. I get it pulled up here by Chip Brown. I'll have this in the description. But I'm just gonna go ahead and read this to you here. It's it's there's a mixture of a little bit of humor and there's a lot of tragedy in here as well. Young men go into the mountains all the time to discover themselves and to propitiate the ghosts of their fathers, but it's the rare father who goes into the mountains to join the ghost of his son. Guy Waterman died 3 years ago on a winter evening on a mountain ridge in New Hampshire. He was 67 years old, a climber, homesteader, and author widely known in New England outdoor circles. He was also the father of 3 sons, and he believed in the peculiarly American myth that says that there is something between fathers and sons that can only be understood in the context of the wilderness. Before he sat down in the snow and froze to death on a February night, he wrote some notes to friends, hoping to explain his decision to take his own life. One was to an old pal named Brad Snyder, who knew of the special kinship Guy felt with his middle son, John Mallon Waterman. In December 1968, when Johnny was 16, I can skip some of that stuff. He became a very successful alpinist, thanks to the tutelage of his father and being surrounded by world-class climbers in Alaska. And he did some extensive hiking of Denali, and we'll talk about what happened, but not to make fun of the guy. We're not making fun of anybody here, but there's some lightheartedness amidst some of the gravity of all this. This guy was what people just kind of described as a crazy genius. And see, his reputation as the crazy genius of Alaska mountaineering was secured long before he disappeared on McKinley. Mount McKinley is the white dude name for Denali. I've used both interchangeably, but I try to stick with the traditional name. Yet what people saw as madness in Johnny was often just Guy's intensity, his father, turned inside out or carried to extremes. Johnny had his father's passion for music, for example, but not his talent. Guy, who was gifted enough to play professional jazz piano as a teenager in Washington, D.C., was always shy about performing. Johnny, with very marginal gifts, would take to a stage of a bar to honk Christmas carols on the clarinet, undaunted by booing patrons or the bartenders plugging in the jukebox.
Shit right there.
Guy's signature tam o'shanter, I don't know what that is, to be quite honest, became part of, let's Google that. Tam o'shanter. It's a type of hat. Okay. It's like a Scottish golf hat.
Okay.
If in cartoon terms that people can understand. Let me get back to this article here. So apparently he really enjoyed wearing that everywhere. He liked to play a ukulele out of tune to people who didn't want the songs. He was just a crazy guy. Let's see. Guy in his 20s had written speeches for leading Republican politicians. Johnny in his 20s once ran for president of the United States, apparently. Johnny had his father's mania for recording the minutiae of daily life, but where Guy jotted notes of color-coded filled cards and stacked jumping off points, Johnny had small. Let me reread that because that was going in a different direction. He had these color-coded card stacks neatly in his left shirt pocket. Johnny had small spiral notebooks and a Harpo Marx-like entanglement of clipboards. This guy was just a mess. And basically, he started upping the ante. He started going on more and more kind of like Aaron Ralston style excursions, because Denali is a huge mountain and you can climb to the top a million different ways, and a lot of them are more dangerous than others. And so this guy he started doing climbs that the most expert people would be scared of doing with groups on his own, and just fucking disappeared one day. So it's not really too much a wonder of what happened. He clearly died out there trying to climb that mountain, but body never found, no evidence of anything ever found. And it's a really sad story. And I think it just speaks to the Wanderlust principle in terms of the panic effect, and not the most authentic version of this. It's the panic that kind of seeps in where someone is trying to up the ante with the adrenaline, trying to see how far they can push it, and maybe just, for lack of a better term, simply not taking it seriously enough because of how eccentric he was, even though he was really, really good at it.
Yeah, that seems to be a big thing and a recurring theme is the again, like Seed was saying earlier, nature's always going to win. There's a certain hierarchy, and if you forget where you stand in that hierarchy, you're going to be put in your place, and you might not. It might be in a way and means that you're not able to get up from being put in your place. But dude, when you're describing him going around playing ukulele tunes out of tune to people, I can totally picture this guy wandering around Northampton, which is like my stomping grounds. Sounds like someone right out of that fucking city.
Yeah, I could easily see him in like Eugene or Portland, Oregon as well.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
similar vibe for sure.
What do
The
you think
bit
about this dude, Seed?
Well, the bit at the beginning, where they were talking about what was the word? Propitiate.
Yes.
I googled that, and it means to win favor of a spirit. So they're talking about that he was doing these things to try and live up to his father, and I think he was trying to prove something. He had some sort of father issue where his dad was doing all these impressive things, and like his ancestry and stuff was all this impressive stuff, and then he was kind of a mediocre dude and was trying to prove some shit, and went too far with it and died from it, I guess, is what it sounds like to me. Or am I missing the point?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
And I was also Googling because I wanted to specify Denali is a mountain range, and which includes Mount McKinley, like the central Denali, but there's the whole range, and the Denali National Park and all that. And this guy technically disappeared on Mount Hunter. Wouldn't have been the end of the world if we didn't see that, but since I saw it, I wanted to clarify that. And apparently he went on what the article says, an audacious climbing feat, which was a 5-month solo ascent of this Mount Hunter, and that's when he vanished. So what the fuck? A
Yeah,
5-month solo ascent? What?
Well, that sounds like he'd be living off the land doing that shit. How do
Yeah.
you carry 5 months worth of gear?
No kidding. Wow,
Yeah.
that is ballsy as fuck.
Dude, and I'm glad Seed brought up or looked up the definition of that word. When he's trying to win favor of spirit.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
beautiful.
Specifically from his father, because it said propitiate the ghost of their fathers.
Yeah,
I didn't,
very
I
good
didn't know what,
point.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that word meant when you were reading it, and I only have my phone here that I do this through. But that's making me think of like, someone trying to win favor of spirit. Like, you got to be aware of like what spirits you're trying to win favor of and conjure, and stepping into some of these places. Like, it's kind of making me think of the idea of cosmicism, how to some of these entities and energies and spirits, we're fucking ants to them. So it's you might be playing into a trickster's hand, or like the whole pan notion. Um, if you don't really know what you're dredging up, and you're doing it for. He said he was trying to like win favor of his father and family and shit. Just got a little lost in the sauce, But
Yeah.
I don't know why that just made me think of the cosmicism notion, and go trying to conquer some of these mountains, because you could consider those entities and gods of sorts, and on their own, I suppose, just that the nature and the land. Got a little off track there, but
No, man. Yeah, the allegories of the wilderness itself are worth bringing up briefly. I've said before, Dante getting lost in the wilderness is the opening of the Divine Comedy, and there's always, there's people who theorize about pyramid power. Similarly, there's philosophies, like naturalist philosophies that see mountains as, spiritual resonance, places of spiritual resonance. So yeah,
You ever hear any of the theories about like some of the like Devil's Tower being like old, gigantic tree stumps? Have you ever
What is
looked into
Devil's
any?
Tower?
Is that where the hell is that? It's this mountain essentially, but it looks like a giant fucking tree stump.
Oh, wow.
There's a
Damn.
lot of high strangeness related to it, but there's a lot of
Interesting.
remnants of like mountains and shit that people have done a lot of documentaries on about, them
Okay.
being severed ancient tree stumps from like the age of the Nephilim and shit.
Wow.
Um,
I
I
love
think
it.
it's a reflection of the macro into the micro and that sort of thing where we're drawing analogies between, small and large things and
yeah,
Yeah.
fractals.
everything's
Very
yeah,
hermetic.
Yeah.
So as we're getting closer to the end here, as the one of the honorable mentions, I thought I'd bring up the very little I thought was amusing about this guy August Engelhart. I mean, the story is pretty entertaining, but like the little that I thought was amusing enough to talk about here. This was the guy who tried to form a cult in New Guinea. He was a German in German-owned New Guinea island, and it was a coconut cult where he thought that coconuts were literally the holy grail of sorts. They were the fruit of the gods, and he said, could live off a coconut. Like he said, it was like 3 to 4 coconuts a day was all anybody needed for their water and everything. And you can survive off of coconuts for a long time because they are really, really good for you, but you cannot just live off of coconuts. And in the Time Suck episode I was listening to just for leisure, he broke down there's unfortunately several crucial vitamins and minerals that your body stores in advance, so you can live off of coconuts for years. But so in like a Robinson Crusoe or like Tom Hanks Castaway scenario, if you're living off of coconuts, you would eventually die, but you could make it quite a while. So this guy just willingly did a Castaway Robinson Crusoe thing. He lived on the beach, didn't really like bathe himself much. He wasn't like a total wild man, but it was very minimalist. He was like all about the beach life, coconut lifestyle, and it got to a point he had some public recognition a little bit. He had, I think, like a couple dozen people out there at one point, but it was never that strong. And he pretty quickly, like in the grand arc of his story, started getting health problems. And it got to the point where like he wasn't moving. You know, he had very little control of his legs and like his muscles. He was getting sores all over his body. He was withering, like his skin was so leathery. He looked like a mummy from being outside and only living off of coconuts. And at the end of his life, he just became kind of an attraction to the locals. They're just like the wild man in the woods, the peaceful wild man. And just the really crazy part, the crazy cherry on top was till the end, till his last fucking breath, he staunchly advocated and tried to proselytize the health longevity of coconuts as he spent like the last 3 decades of his life decrepit as fuck. So I don't know, it's a weird one. Yeah.
You ever hear like breatharianism or breatharian cults?
I don't think I know that one.
Yeah,
It's insane. It's like a step up of people who just like, it's what it sounds like. They consume air.
Oh, okay. Jesus Christ. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that far off.
See how far that takes you.
Yeah, and that guy lived from 1875 to 1919, apparently.
You know what you can eat every day and survive for a long time is prime rib.
Yeah, amen to that.
Like, no, seriously, or like a ribeye steak, I think is what it was actually. A ribeye steak every day, you get all the vitamins and minerals that you need.
No shit.
As far as I understood it. Yeah.
At least to keep going.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Don't do it. I tried it for a while. I did the keto diet and it sucks after a while, but I couldn't even think about doing coconuts. I'd be so sick of that shit after like a week.
Oh yeah, big time.
Some variety.
Yeah. So again, you know, as an honorable mention, Pan's Ram, we'll save him, but the hobo train hopping serial killer, wild dude. And then Gene Rossellini, we'll save him to the end because if Seed Person has to get out of here, we've talked about Gene Rossellini. I have in other episodes. So the only other one is Timothy Treadwell, the Grizzly Man. And I want to hear both you guys' thoughts on him because he's just a really out there character. There's a certain relatability in a way, because his story is really laid bare in the documentary. It's been a while since I've seen it. I did not watch it in prep for this, but he was a real DIY grassroots, like, I don't know, not quite animal rights, but almost in that vein, just like conservationist would probably be the best way to put it, where he really was ballsy enough to do, and yeah, stupid enough, but we'll get into some of it a little bit because it's worth explaining. He was ballsy enough to throw himself into bear territory. And for anybody that doesn't know, this is a guy who was just going and mingling mano a mano with grizzly bears in the Alaskan summers in the wilderness, which is fucking crazy, obviously. And he was filming it himself, which eventually became large parts of the documentary. And he made a lot of progress. He did it for years. And it's just insane that he made it so far. And he has enough documentation to show that he had a methodology. I mean, he was kooky and it was all just kind of like touch and go, but he learned the basics of like how he really got close to these things and became friends with them. It's pretty mind-blowing. So you got to give him credit in that sense. And obviously you're playing with fire at any time. And there is a superstition in conservationism, I guess for lack of a more overarching term. I don't even know what you'd say, but like hunting culture, whatever. they call it the 25th bear theory, which is most bears do not attack people. They really don't. They're smart enough to not give a shit and just stay away. Only if you're trying to mess with them, they'll mess with you. Or if it's just a bad situation where you've pissed them off in some way, then they're going to come after you. But so it's that 25th bear thing. Like only 1 in 25 bears is ever going to fuck with you. And it's just kind of a colloquial thing. But so you always have that to keep in mind. But the real thing is similar to Chris McCandless, where he waited too long and then he couldn't get over the high tide. It wasn't a high tide issue. For some dumbass reason, Timothy Treadwell just decided to stay longer. And this is the part of the season going into fall. Food is becoming more scarce, and this was another thing that really led to his survivability. Is he was obviously going, I mean, bears are hibernating, so they're only going to be around so long, but he was hanging out when the food is so abundant. The bears are just leaving half-eaten fish in piles on the banks. Like, it's so abundant that the bears don't even have to eat the whole fish. They eat their favorite parts of the fish and then just leave it for the grass. So they're not worried about food at all until you get to a certain point. They're going to start getting ornery, and maybe it's just ornery, but it doesn't help when you toss hunger in there too. And for some fucking reason, he brought his girlfriend out there on that like only time that he stayed out this long, and they both got eaten alive. It's fucking brutal because I don't believe it's ever been released. I'm quite certain of that. But I could be wrong. I'm quite certain of that. But it was most certainly recorded, and they believe it was ruffled up in the tent or accidentally turned on in someone's bag. It's a really darkly synchronous thing that it just happened to be on and record the audio of both of them dying.
I believe I've heard the audio before.
Have you?
I believe so.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's out now. I haven't heard it, but I don't even know if I've looked for it really. Sounds fucking harrowing to say the least.
I don't know if I'd want to hear it.
I don't go out of my way looking for that stuff anymore because it's you come to a point where you understand like, oh, this is actually happening. Like, get so desensitized watching movies and fucked up shit growing up at a young age. Like,
I feel you.
But yeah, I don't go seeking shit like that out anymore. But I feel somewhere along the line I've come across that audio or something that was a similar scenario, and it's not pleasant at all.
Yeah, man. I feel like if it was put in front of me, I might listen. There is a morbid curiosity. I wish there was a better, more empathetic way to put it, but there is that human thing of just like, my God, like I can't even believe that that's a real thing. But it's sad, man. Like, what? Let me ask you guys this, so we can contextualize this story more. Why did this dude just throw all caution to the wind? It seemed like, as dangerous as it was, he had a pretty good thing going for him, and he knew like this is some basic stuff of just bears going into hibernation. This is bear 101, so he had to know that the stakes were being raised. Do you think these guys are just, we talked about ego, we talked about the propitiation word of the day, of like the ancestors. We could even talk about like the metaphysics of the wilderness itself. There's the panic effect. What about this like slow trickle of just kind of losing your mind? Because it's sure there's ego in there, but it's not like I want to be the best. It's like, yeah, I feel comfortable making this wildly irrational decision based on no prior experience that I had. Like, all prior experience tells me otherwise, but I feel really confident about this batshit crazy decision. What is that? And why do we keep finding it in these wilderness stories?
I think
It's
that for him particularly, spending that much time alone with animals, you're going to build a framework in your mind of how you sit in the animal hierarchy, like people that work with dogs and wolves and things like that that are in packs. And I think that you think, hey, we're friends and we're buddies, and I'm part of the pack or whatever. But then in this situation, the reality of it is he went from being friends with the bears to being competition for food to being food as the season changed, and like, I don't know, maybe it was that, not necessarily, well, it was a delusion, but the framework in his head had him being deluded. He was seeing it as he was part of the pack and they were all going to go hibernate together or whatever, but in
I guess
reality,
you're right. He thought he was part of the pack. There were
he might have
recurring
been part of the
bears.
pack at the beginning, but then,
Yeah.
Eventually, like, your food. Sorry, bro.
No kidding. Man, what a turn.
Yeah, it's easy to. I can see it being very easy to lose touch with the balance of nature's order when you feel like you become part of the pack and you're in isolation with just that. And it's also that that recurring motif of the possession factor of just the whole environment you're kind of engaging with. And yeah, again, I think it comes back down to it's just really easy to lose touch with the balance of nature when, like, you're I don't know, there's just a natural order to things, and when you isolate yourself against that natural order, yeah, you might become a part of it, but then when the seasons turn, you know, you're going to again find out where you sit on that hierarchy of natural order, and it's nothing personal to the fucking bears, I'm sure. It's kind of that same cosmicism idea, but not quite as extreme, where it's like you can find kinship with, like, the animal realm, and there is some level of love and concern, but when push comes to shove, like Seed said, you became competition for hunting, and then if they need food, you're gonna go. And it's easy. I think I can imagine it being very easy to again forget about that aspect of it when you're like enraptured in the love and the awe of being a part of this other, like, the animal kingdom, so to speak.
Yeah, man, Mother Nature is ruthless and wastes none. If you're around and there's no other food, then guess what just happened? Um, yeah, crazy stuff. And so to wrap this up, and also, I guess, I well said, both of you. And yeah, I think it probably does really, a lot of it, I'm sure, is chalked up to the fact that he probably was part of the pack to some degree and then just way overestimated that. Otherwise, how would you feel so comfortable? So that had to be it, which is just way more terrifying. So in conclusion here, we'll mention Gene Rossellini because he has got a weirdly dark thematic ending that just kind of feels like an ending to it all, because most of these stories have been kind of dark. And Gene Rossellini was a guy who a lot of people called the mayor of Hippie Cove. He lived outside of, man, where was it? Cordova, Alaska. And it's just more Alaska, There's not a whole lot of context needed. And he was an affluent son of a like wealthy business people. I believe they were restaurateurs, and from Washington. And he was just kind of like a wandering academic, in the sense of, like, he had enough money to take a lot of classes: anthropology, history, philosophy. So he was really into all that stuff, but he never cared about actually getting a degree. And then he just kind of left university eventually and started traveling, drifted around the West Coast, uh, settled in Alaska, where he just became the mayor of Hippie Cove. He became, to the people in the surrounding area, just like this passive, nice Ted Kaczynski. You know, instead of bombing people, he had this fucking crazy idea. For some reason, like, it's so weird that anyone would even feel such a deep need to prove such a strange idea. He wanted to see if we had evolved past the point of our, like, I don't know what you might call like a primitive supremacy, you know, like a Spartan, like just being of the wilderness, you know, uh, something hunter gatherer, I guess, you know, and because he thought that with all our social mechanisms, you know, we couldn't do that. And I mean, really, we couldn't. It's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different conversation. It's kind of feels to me like comparing apples to oranges. And the fact that he would spend like a couple decades of his life in the wilderness as a Stone Age person is fucking crazy. Um, and he ended up at the end of it. Strangely enough, he just kind of, even though he had basically done it, he'd been living out there the whole time and he had strict rules. I guess he didn't do it to his satisfaction. So he wrote like a suicide note saying that he had failed his experiment and he stabbed himself to death. A knife, a long knife right in the heart, and ended it. Yeah. So, and he was born, I couldn't get the birthday. It was like the 40s or 50s. He died in 1991. So what what the hell? I don't know, man. But that's some Wanderlust shit for sure. I just don't. It's so far out there. It's very
Yeah,
kind of Ted Kaczynski-ish.
to I don't, again, not only having that context to go off of, feeling like putting that much time and effort into such a unique path, and then coming to the conclusion that you've somehow failed, and you can shank yourself,
Yeah.
and rather than, like, seems like obviously a smart guy, maybe he just didn't feel like, I don't know, sounds like he's one of those like knowledge for the sake of knowledge type of people, and maybe he just didn't see any reason to reframe his experiment or whatever. He's just very I don't know. He used himself as a guinea pig of for real.
Yeah, maybe too much cabin fever. Who knows? I don't
Yeah,
know. What do
the
you think, Seed?
isolation can be bad after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said was what I was already thinking about, like the call of the wilderness and like the whatever it is that's pulling these people to it, that's causing this wanderlust syndrome. And I think it's different stuff, but it's all the answer to everybody, it seems to be in the wilderness.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
And that it's a place of unknowns and possible answers, and like these people go out and then they're isolated, and when you're isolated, it's easy to get into a semi permeable reality state where you're creating your own, like you're seeing stuff that what is that term, uh, uh pareidolia, I think, where you're seeing maybe
Pareidolia.
I don't know I can't remember what it is, but and so you're making up, like in the olden
Yeah.
times you'd see like the gods and things like that, and like these are the stories of people that are living out there and they're putting these personifications on natural things and creating a different reality in their own framework of how they perceive the world. And that's the downfall for everybody. Seems like that they think one thing, but in reality we're like, why'd you think that? But it's just because they're isolated, I think, has a
Yeah.
lot to do with it, and you start to make up your own world.
Pareidolia is a good thing to bring up there. Yeah, for um That's one of those words I sometimes like. I know where it fits, but I forget how to give a concise definition. And you were spot on. The tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous visual pattern. So, yeah, absolutely. The human ability to see shapes or make pictures out of randomness.
I always think of it in terms of like looking at, seeing things in clouds, especially. But I know apophenia is a related word, and there's a book by Phil Hines. It's a chaos magic book called Apophenia, but it's related to pareidolia. But I always forget, like you just said, how
Yeah,
to.
okay. A- Apophenia, I'm just reading it here, is basically the same thing except with patterns specifically, not seeing visual like art, for lack of a better term.
Like synchronicity in a way, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, yeah, poignant thoughts on the enigmatic Gene Rossellini and all these guys. We've definitely given our money's worth in this conversation. And we talked about all the characters as a all diverse array of people. I think it's well said that they all had slightly different reasons that manifested similarly and brought them all to this strange wilderness confrontation. So what are you guys' closing thoughts on all this? Open ended. Chris,
Oh,
let's go with you first. Or actually,
okay.
maybe just in case Seed Person has to split, let's go with
Oh
Seed
yeah,
Person
yeah,
first.
do that.
All right. I think that if uh I think that this is a call that a lot of people experience. And I think that some people are prone to taking it to an extreme level. And just if anybody that hears this does get that call, do your research first,
Yeah.
and leave information, details, and stuff. Um, yeah, know what you're doing before you just run off into the woods, and don't follow any lights that you see.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff though. And it's something that is primal. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a very cool conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Not sure what to make of it all, but it's a topic that's fascinated me. And over the years, I just saw recurring patterns, and I was like, I guess I don't know, like a wanderlust syndrome. So it's cool to be able to mash it all together and then see the differences, see the comparisons. There's something about the archetype and the metaphysics of all this, but it's quite a broad topic. And yeah, it's just like shadow work. There's plenty of shadow work and self-confrontation involved in this topic. So just tread lightly. Don't be afraid of it. Like the wilderness is a beautiful thing, but be careful for sure. For sure. Chris, what are your closing thoughts, my man?
So, well, one, I've had this has been a great conversation, but and I think we can branch off of it too in the future if you want more of like I was saying at the beginning, the cosmic wanderlust, the inner, the psychonaut aspect of the wanderlust syndrome, which I relate
Yeah.
to a lot. But this whole, I don't want to, get too deep into anything because I know we're trying to wrap up, but throughout this whole conversation kept making me think of you guys probably have heard of him, that free climber Alex Honnold or Hanold or something.
The name rings a
Uh,
bell.
but just he's this free climber who has done some of the most insane, like he's got the wanderlust fever for sure. But I wrote this note and it's just making me think of like he will climb the most insane mountains without any gear, and there's a few documentaries on him, and there's some of the most tense documentaries I've ever seen. But that like adrenaline junkie aspect of the wanderlust syndrome, like seems like some of these people are trying to seek out a sense of spirit, but more in the material world. And I don't
Yeah.
know if I wonder if someone who has to go to such an extreme of like climbing 1,000-foot cliff where you could easily slip and die, like are they so devoid of spiritual connection on the inside, or is seeking it in the outward world just their way of connecting to spirit? Um, so that was a note that's just where this conversation's kind of left me thinking.
The spirituality of the adrenaline junkie is an interesting side tangent that I haven't thought about too much, but like the wilderness is where that kind of meets. Seems like some of these people, that is their like religion. They're like seeking that transcendental adrenaline rush of these in these isolated places that they just really shouldn't be. I mean, more
Yeah,
power to them if you want to do that, but like naturalistically speaking, these are like untouched remote places, and like it's not where humans are. So yeah, it's
yeah.
probably
I
like
mean,
that for a reason.
Joseph Campbell relates the wilderness to like the chaos of the the subconscious and shit like that.
Hmm.
So I
Good
think that's
point.
an interesting aspect to this all too, and
Big time.
something to consider while riding out this conversation.
Right on. Well, potentially the longest episode, aside from maybe the chat I had with AP Strange and Soraya Azkath, and I'm really glad we got to do it. This is I was right. I'm happy to say I was right in terms of this was definitely one of my favorite episodes. It had a little bit of everything. There's conspiracy and unexplainable and a little bit of occult philosophy and adventurism and all sorts of shit. Really cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like the building of the conversations that we've been having. I think that's a cool aspect of,
Me too.
like you were saying, this isn't like a new phase of the show, but it's yeah, I don't know. It's been cool fucking getting to talk to you guys more regularly and hearing the building of the conversation collectively. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been pretty cool, man.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm happy to have you both here. Um, well, I guess that's it for now. The best place to check out both of these dudes is on Instagram. You can find that in the show description as well, along with everything else that we talked about. Stay safe out there, pursuing your wanderlust, folks. And don't forget that I am Anthony Tyler. I've been sitting here with Seed Person and Chris Fiato, and this has been Black Hoodie Alchemy. Smoke weed and God bless.
These full moon eyes are for you.